Bananas Jesus, colleagues, the third special session of Imina 35 na Legislature in Guam is called to order. Assistant Majority Leader, you are recognized at this time.
Sidus Maasi, Madam Speaker. Notwithstanding the House rules, I move to adopt today's third special session agenda dated September 14th, 2020.
A motion was made to adopt today's third special session agenda dated September 14, 2020. Are there any objections? Hearing none, motion carries. At this time, colleagues, I would like to ask Senator Mary Torres to please kindly lead us in prayer.
Ginaani Tata Ilahina Deni Spiritu Santo. Amen. It is written in 2 Timothy 1:17 that God hath not given us the spirit of fear, but of power and of love and of a sound mind. Zeus Tata, we pray for families that are stricken by COVID-19, for the souls of our community members who have died, and for all those who fear the present and have little promise of what tomorrow will bring. Give us hope, dear Lord. Show us your mercy so that we may find peace. Abundantly bless us with the strength to do good by your will and to do good to others always. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Hinani Tata, Ilahina, Zeni Spiritu Santo. Amen.
Si Diyos si Senator Torres, for the recognition of a recipient of Imiladsan Mastakilu na sacrificial, could Senator Regine Bisco Lee please lead us?
Sidus Masi, Speaker, and good morning, colleagues. On behalf of a grateful island and country, we honor Native Seaman Second Class World War II Pedro Kiritai Nauta and the family of Native Seaman Second Class Pedro Kiritai Nauta for making the ultimate sacrifice in service and defense of our island and country.
Si Diyos si Senator Lee, and at this time, Senator Lee, can you please lead us in the recitation of the Inafresi?
Inafresi, ginini mastakilu, gina soku, imas takalum ikurasonhu, zanimas figu, neninas sinyaku, huufresin maisizu, harabai putahi, zanu defendi, ihinengi, ikutura, ilingwahi, airi, hanum, zanitano zamoro. Nirin shaku ridetu ginina zuas tata, esti huafitma gihilu Biblia, zani benderahu, benderan guahan.
Si Diyos si Senator Lee, and for the singing of the Guam hymn in Chamorro and the singing of the national anthem, would the gentlemen members kindly lead us in both?
Anogi Chamorro, Puritanota, Cantara tunanya gitoru iluga. Para y honra, para y gloria, viva es la sempada. Para y honra, para y gloria, viva es la sempada. Todo y tiempo y paz para vida, dangin ilan na bendición. Contra peligro, nada sa fuan, Diyos protegis San Juan. Contra peligro, nada sa fuan, Diyos protegis and the twilight lands gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous flight. O'er the rambles we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rockets red glare, and the bursting air gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does the star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave?
Si Jules Mossy, kindly be seated. Manana si Jules, Madam Clerk. Haziman Gaigi Gwini, put for vote. Roll call.
Senator Castro,
In order.
Senator Lee, Senator Marsh Titano, Senator Moylan, Senator Munya, Speaker Munya Barnes,
Manana si Jules, Gagia.
Vice Speaker Nelson, Senator Perez, Senator Rangel, Senator San Augustine, Senator Shelton, Senator Taitagui, Senator Pito Terlahi, Senator Therese Terlahi, Senator Torres. Madam Speaker, there is a quorum.
Si Jules Mossy, Madam Clerk. Assistant Majority Leader, Senator March Titano, you are recognized.
Situus Maasi, Madam Speaker. I move to approve legislative journals dated July 1st, 2019 and July 3rd, 2019, subject to corrections.
On the motion to approve legislative journals dated July 1st, 2019 and July 13, 2019, are there any objections? Seeing or hearing none, motion carries. Assistant Majority Leader, Senator Marsh Titano, you are recognized.
Situus Maasi, Madam Speaker. I move to waive special session agenda item 9.
On that motion to waive special session agenda item 9, are there any objections? Hearing none, seeing none, motion carries. Assistant Majority Leader, you are recognized.
Madam Speaker, I would like to advise the members of the messages from E. Magahagan Guahan specific to the call to special session, and move that the messages from E. Magahagan Guahan be appended to today's session journal.
On the motion that messages from Imaga Hagan Guahan be appended to today's session journal, are there any objections? Hearing or seeing none, motion carries. Assistant Majority Leader, Senator March Titano, you are still recognized.
Madam Speaker, I move to waive special session agenda items 11 and 12.
Colleagues, on the motion to waive special session agenda items 11 and 12, are there any objections? Seeing or hearing none, motion carries. Assistant Majority Leader, Senator March Titano, you are still recognized.
Madam Speaker, I move that bill introduced, Bill number 13-S, be deemed to have been given its first reading.
On the motion, are there any objections? Seeing or hearing none, motion carries. Senator March Titano, Assistant Majority Leader, you are still recognized.
Madam Speaker, I move to excuse senators not present for today's special session.
On that motion, are there any objections? Seeing or hearing none, motion carries. Colleagues, we are on second reading file. Assistant Majority Leader, Senator Marsh Teichner, I will recognize you at this time.
Sutuus Maasi, Madam Speaker. I move to resolve into Committee of the Whole with the Oversight Chair as the head of the committee.
Of OFB, and the people to come in, Assistant Majority Leader, OFB, and the administration. DOA, can you go ahead and just state it?
Yes, with those being called in to be at minimum OFB, the Department of Administration, and the Department of Revenue and Taxation.
BBMR.
BBMR, sorry.
And BBMR. On that motion, are there any objections?
Point of order, Madam Speaker.
Can you state your point of order?
Yes, the bill has not had a public hearing, so does that mean you're waiving the public hearing on
Yes, it
this
is.
bill as an emergency measure?
On the point of information, Senator Therese, I did submit that thing early the waiver early this morning, and we are. So we're in a motion right now. Is there any objections? The waiver was submitted. Senator, we are on the motion. Are there any objections? There's an objection. All those in favor of hearing the bill 13-S signify by raising your hand. To hearing the bill.
Hearing the bill through the Committee of the Whole, is that what you're saying?
To be in the Committee of the Whole. To hear this bill. 13-S. Yeah. I'm going to state again for the record, for clarification for the clerk, this is a motion to resolve into the committee of a whole, okay? And bring the necessary Office of Finance and Budget from the legislature and from the administration, Department of Administration, Department of Revenue and Taxation, and BBMR. On that motion, there has been an objection. All those to resolve, to approve the motion to resolve into the committee of whole, signify by raising your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Motion carries. Motion carries. We'll take a moment's recess to bring the necessary parties in.
Ready? The Committee of the Whole is called to order. I'd like to ask the Sergeant Arms to please swear in the panel. We have, to my immediate right, we have Mr. Lester Carlson and Mr. Edward Byrne. And to my left, Steve OFB, you can please stand. Steve Guerrero, Director of OFB, and Llewellyn Terlai from OFB.
Okay. Can I have you guys all raise your right hand? Under penalties of perjury, you all affirm that what you say in today's hearing will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? Okay. Mr. Chair, they're all under oath.
Thank you very much, Sergeant Arm. Madam Speaker, you have a message you wanted to present before I read the rules of engagement and introduce the bill. Ma'am?
Jesus Masi, Mr. Chair, we just found out just now that one of the members from BBMR, who's been there for many, many decades within the government of Guam, Mr. John Pangilinan, has passed away. And at this time, if we could just be afforded just a small amount of time so that we can pay our respect and condolences for a moment of silence right now. Mr. Chair, if that's okay with you.
All right. A moment of silence.
Jesus Masi, Mr. Chair, thank you. Thank you. Our condolences, Mr. Carson, to your team.
All right. The individual we're referring to specifically is Mr. John A.B. Pangilinan, who was employed with BBMR in the government of Guam. My colleagues, rules of engagement for discussion. 2 rounds of questions. Members are allowed 5 minutes. Time will not include the response that's given. After the questions have been exhausted, we will dismiss the panel, and any floor amendments will be entertained only if it's submitted via writing to the session drive. All right? That being said, I'd ask the representative of the governor's office, Mr. Carlson or Mr. Byrne, to please present to us the bill that's before us, which is Bill number 13S. Sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning, everybody. Before you is a submission from the governor. It actually is Bill 282 with some very minor adjustments. In the front, consistent with what we had advocated for since the beginning, was a request of the body to consider raising revenues by $7 million, $2 million in corporate, and $5 million in withholding taxes. Everything else with respect to revenues remains the same. The unappropriated amount of $81,603 from the bill as passed was taken into consideration, and the allocation of the funding that we have before you, we are restoring the level for the Department of Administration, given the myriad of activities, their critical role in getting out the unemployment checks, income tax payments, vendor payments, HR, the whole litany of what Mr. Byrne and his staff does. So we're asking for an increased level of $750,000, $750,968. We are also seeking the body's support for additional funding for the Department of Revenue and Taxation. That amount that we're requesting is $465,203. Again, the Department of Revenue and Taxation is the primary issuer of notices for tax liabilities, business licenses, driver's license, all the primary tax categories of the government. So we're seeking your assistance in being able to restore the necessary funding to that agency. The remainder of the money is going to go to the Medicaid local match program, $5,865,432,000. That will bring our local match level from 900 and total, rather, with the increase from $97,242,027 to $131,257,318. We also made one more adjustment when the amendment to adjust upwards the Manpower Development Fund was passed by this body. That was added to the budget for the Guam Community College. There was no offsetting general fund made to Guam Community College. So what we have done is, because of this body's good faith effort in restoring the Manpower Development Fund, we are seeking the body's concurrence to reprogramming $1 million from GCC and allocating that to the judiciary. In essence, that is all we did to the bill. I think we added the hot bond back in, but that might be a subject for a different, another discussion. But the JFK legislation, everything else that was put into the bill was not changed.
Thank you, Mr. Carlson. We now begin the rounds of question. Yes, sir, if you have that, hand that to me and I'll pass it back. So, what will be passed, yes, ma'am, what will be passed around is exactly what he stated, so that everybody sees exactly what he mentioned. Yes, ma'am?
Maybe before questions, we could hear from OFB as to their analysis of this proposal.
You want OFB to give an analysis of their proposal, of the governor's proposal? Steve, if you would like to give one, it's open for your comments.
Thank you and good morning. Yeah, we just took basically the governor's bill that was submitted a couple of days ago and compared it to 282 S bill that we have provided the legislature as OFB's recommendation that was subsequently passed by the body. We did the comparison between what they're requesting in increases in 5 agencies, and it's exactly what Mr. Carlson said. It's just plugging in these amounts, $750,968 into Department of Administration, $465,203 into revenue taxation, taking $1 million out of GCC, reallocating that $1 million to Judiciary Guam, and increasing the federal match portion of public health by $34,015,291, plus also supposedly increasing the local match share by $5,783,829. That is what Mr. Carlson presented, and that's what we've also found in our analysis. However, in looking at the allocation and the way the funds were drawn out, is they did increase the local match portion of public health, but didn't add the $5.78 82829 to the appropriation level. And the 81,603 that was mentioned by Mr. Carlson was basically, in our analysis, was appropriated twice. So we need to go back and take that one out. So aside from that, everything that he has mentioned is exactly what's being presented here. As far as the increase in the 7 million, I am still of the opinion that our revenues as presented by OFB in the bill is very, I think it's an adequate revenue that we can look forward and anticipate. By all means, I hope we generate more, definitely. But, you know, being conservative, as we've always been since day one, and taking everything into account, and looking at what we basically did a projection utilizing August actuals that we were able to pull out of the system. It indicates that, you know, the levels that we are suggesting for the remaining of 2020 and what we anticipate for 2021 basically hasn't changed. Oh, yeah. There are also maybe two other areas that we need to. That we may need to just bring to the attention under Public Defender Service Corporation in the budget. We need to adjust the language that was submitted as it reads. The way it reads right now is the unexpended balance of the appropriation section 2 of Chapter 4 of Public Law 3536 needs to be rewritten to reflect the unexpended balance of the appropriation section 2 part 2 of chapter 7 of Public Law 3536. So that's just an administrative correction that needs to be done in the governor's bill. And then for the Mayor's Council of Guam, we went through this when we were trying to figure out the appropriations for the mayors as it is in this fiscal year, where I believe there's a total of $380,000 that was allocated for the mayors, with each mayor getting $20,000. However, in our floor debate, and as we passed the law, because the amount of appropriation that was available to the mayors was decreased to, I believe, $281,000, that allocation was considered to be the basis to come up with that amount. And in the governor's bill, it kind of like stated the provision. Instead of saying may, it says shall, and the amount is $20,000. So, you know, that needs to be corrected, because if you leave it as presented, then there's insufficient funds, I believe about $98,000 to do that. Other than that, we didn't find anything, no changes to the 282S bill as submitted by the governor as compared to our bill that was passed by the legislature.
All right, Senator Therese, and we'll begin now the questions. We'll start with from the back. Senator Clint Rizzo, do you have any questions, sir?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, my question is for BBMR. So with this budget request, the difference is about 7 million additional revenues. I know we've kind of gone through this before. This feels like deja vu all over again. But could you go through that $7 million figure and explain where what revenue categories will be increased? Sorry, what revenue categories are accounting for that $7 million difference? And how did you arrive, what was the methodology for arriving at those revenue projections for those specific categories?
Thank you, Senator Ruggiero. It's two revenue categories. Corporate income tax, we are asking for a $2 million upward adjustment. As mentioned the last time that we were before you guys, we had already collected in excess of $91 million, and it's probably 95. It's probably about 95 million to date. So we're asking for the body's consideration in the corporate income tax category of a $2 million upward adjustment. And then I must acknowledge the work Senator Lee in her amendment, where she independently went out and looked at withholding taxes. We maintain that we have a baseline, never mind about the federal unemployment insurance, but we have a baseline of $20 million. I think Senator Lee's analysis was somewhere in the neighborhood of about 21 million, if I remember correctly. That gets us to 240 million. We're asking for 235. So I think between what we presented and the valiant effort of Senator Lee to the body, specifically on the withholding taxes, I believe that continues to support our request to the body for reconsideration of those two revenue amounts.
Thank you. Thank you, Senator Clinton. Senator Lee, do you have any questions to the panel?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to the panel who joined us this morning. I guess this question would be for Mr. Carlson. Mr. Carlson, in the governor's veto message, she mentioned additional resources being needed for public health and for the hospital. So I just wanted to give you an opportunity to detail for the body any differences between this Bill 13S and the budget bill that recently passed, especially with regard to public health. I mean, we're in the middle of this pandemic, and so I just wanted to get that perspective from you folks.
Thank you, Senator Lee. I hope everybody has a copy of this now. Oh, yeah, okay, so you got it digitally, everybody? Just to make sure. It just says notes on the revised budget, or on the revised bill. It's just that one pager that I read off. It'd probably be helpful if everybody had it. It's pretty succinct.
Yes, my colleagues, if you go to your, the bill itself, click on it, and then it'll pop up notes on the revised bill. You see exactly what Mr. Carlson had stated earlier.
Yes,
Senator Lee, or Mr. Carlson, whichever one.
So I guess if you could just reiterate, there have been some concerns expressed from colleagues that in the middle of this pandemic, we are shortchanging not just public health, but also the hospital. And the governor's bill that was sent down doesn't do anything for the hospital. So if you could maybe speak to that.
Okay, thank you again, Senator Lee. You'll see in the middle of the page, you have a total of $3,081,000. Again, Mr. Guerrero concurred with the $81,000 inclusion, and I appreciate that. And you'll see above it, the Medicaid program local match increased by $5,865,432. So the bulk of the $7 million that we're requesting is going to public health, specifically for the Medicaid program. And there's a reason for that. It's a leveraged program. We are currently enjoying 87-13 match, and that is the match ratio that we use for the entire year. We don't know what's going to happen on January 1st, but the 87-13 match is good until the end of this calendar year. So we just, taking the conservative view that Mr. Guerrero always takes, that's what we used. We're hopeful that it stays the same. It gets waived, but currently it's 87-13. So the leveraging of that additional funds is shown, the third bullet from the bottom, where the federal matching grants and aid for public health increased from $97,242,027 to $131,257,318. That is the sum of the effort that this bill was primarily focused in achieving: help to public health. And then as it relates to the hospital, we received a request last week from the hospital for a reimbursement of differential pay for the hardworking staff as our primary COVID designated hospital. So with the discussion and concurrence with Mr. Byrne, we're transferring $2.4 million to the hospital to reimburse the costs associated with the staff that are working in those categories, primarily in the 15 and 25% differential category. As you might all recall, when we got out of PCOR 1 there in late May, I believe, there was a rescission of the 10% differential pay. So we agreed to their request, and they should be receiving those funds next couple of days. So we continue to assist the hospital as much as we possibly can.
Thank you, Mr. Carlson. And so funding this local match for the Medicaid program, it just represents an opportunity for us to have a tremendous return on this investment in the local match and have additional federal dollars come in. And that's the reason why we're asking for this very slight increase in this category. Is that correct?
That's correct, Senator. There was consideration by BBMR on a bill that had probably this long of ebbs and flows of funds from Bill 282. In deciding on her action, the governor basically came to the conclusion that the work that was done by the body should be recognized. However, she still believes that there could be more to be done, and I think that what she ultimately landed on and transmitted to the body was not very detailed, very hard to follow. It just resounded in a message to let's please help public health.
Thank you, Mr. Carlson. An additional question or concern that has come up over the past few weeks is just that, the governor has received, the executive branch has received millions and millions of dollars in CARES Act funding. And based on what we've gotten back from the administration, there could be to the tune of maybe $93 million that has been kind of unaccounted for. And so I understand that the money that has been spent represents a certain amount, but can you maybe give us an update on the funds that are already encumbered? Because I understand that, there are a number of programs that have been already rolled out and money that's already been spent and booked, but I also understand that, there may be a significant amount of money that has already been placed for a certain program. So if you could give us an update on that, I think, certain members may be not wanting to jump on board with the bill as presented because, we're flush with cash. We have so much money coming in from the CARES Act to solve all of these problems, so no need to do any work or solutions on our part. But I just wanted to give you an opportunity to maybe give us an update on CARES funding.
Thank you, Senator Lee. There's a very big distinction between this, which makes appropriations for the operations of the executive, legislative, and judicial branches of the government of Guam for the fiscal year ending September 30th, 2021, and making other appropriations and establishing miscellaneous and administrative provisions. This is the operative document for the operation of the government of Guam. The Coronavirus Relief Fund that the governor has sole discretion on is to fight COVID. There's a very, very big difference. So she is allocating resources, the $2.4 million that I spoke about recently, that came from what we call the CRF, Coronavirus Relief Fund. Those monies we did transmit to the body early on a budget, and GMH was included in the differential pay category. And so upon substantiation of a request and a resolution from the board, we are in the process of reimbursing them for differential pay / hazardous duty exposure pay. I don't believe that it is accurate to say that this money can be used for general governmental operations, because it can't. And it cannot be used for revenue shortfalls. And Mr. Byrne and I have the responsibility of adhering to the federal government requirements for the use of the money. As a matter of fact, we have a report due, the first thorough report next week, due to the federal government. So we're working on being able to utilize the format and the guidelines in order to submit that report to the Office of the Inspector General on time, September 21st. So I will say that it is a fluid document. If we see the GITA Business Grant Program, they, for all intents and purposes, they tapped out at 16 million. So we discussed that with GITA, and what was originally allocated at $20 million was then capped at 16, and I transferred the other $4 million to the quarantine facility account. So please, there really isn't a way that when somebody's duties are not substantially dedicated to the COVID response, we can't just say, oh, it's available and that piggy bank can be tapped, because it can't.
Thank you, Mr. Carlson. And Mr. Chair, just one last question. Mr. Carlson, if the administration was to not follow these federal guidelines for the CARES Act funding, what could happen?
We'd have to pay it back, and there's no way we can pay back that amount of money. I'm very concerned about adhering to the liabilities, the guidelines, the reporting requirements, and anything associated with that. It does not bode well that we can't even take the time to report to the federal government on a very generous allocation of $118 million. $118 million that we very, very, very much need. So between the two of us, we're charged with getting that report done, making sure it's accurate, and not being late.
Sujas Masi. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator Lee. Senator Will, did you have a question? I apologize. You're back there. Sir?
It's okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chairman, my basic question is to the panel is what's changed? The last time we were here, I think it was August 11th, and Senator Rigel hinted at some of that. I presented two indicators. I presented some figures associated with the gross receipts tax and withholding taxes. Now, in the governor's revised budget, she doesn't use the GRT as having gone up, but we're seeing that the income and withholding taxes are the areas that are increased. But I just want to remind everyone, and then I'll get to my question for either member of the panel, that the GRT between that period of time of March, April, May, June has an average decline of 17%. Even if you took the withholding taxes for the same period, Mr. Chair, between March, April, May, and June of this year, if you averaged it out, it's at a negative 3%. Even as early as this morning with you, Mr. Chairman, I had asked if an economic development strategy had been presented. Is there something that was different that's on the table that could maybe persuade me to support the revised budget? And the short answer out there from you, please correct me if I'm wrong, is that none's been submitted. And so I'm having a hard time understanding where the increase is going to come unless there's a plan to hire these people back. Where do we get the income tax revenues or corporate income tax revenues or withholding tax revenues? And I want to quote yourself, Mr. Chairman, from an August 6th article in the media that you yourself had submitted to the media that there's an influx of federal assistance money, and I'll summarize, pool money, that's going to help keep the government afloat. And then if you refer back to the August video, the August record, when we had these roundtables with the administration, certain admissions were made that these spikes in certain months were attributed to the infusion at the time of CARES Act funds, and we saw that, okay? I think if you go back on the tape, it'll reflect that. But let me fast forward from then. Actually, let me take you back one more article, and then I'll ask my question. The governor was quoted as saying in April that they're looking at federal spending to bridge the gap while tourism remains on the decline. And so my question would be, is that the strategy? Now, I can respect the fact that the administration is posturing that they're realizing certain revenues from this fiscal year, and I get it, I respect that. Because I can see that happening, Mr. Chairman, when the tourism numbers were doing really well. I can even see that as a result of our efforts in the 34th to increase the GRT. Gosh, I might even submit that I can see that as a reality of the 1% on improvements on real property. But things are very different, Mr. Chairman, from March, April, May, June, July, August, September. So the arguments, all the planning factors you can, for all intents and purposes, can throw out. And so my question is, I'll repeat it, is that the strategy? To rely on federal spending to stimulate this economy? Mr. Chairman, I voted to hear the bill because I think that's going to decide my yes or no vote on the override, whether to accept this one or hold fast on the one we passed. And so that's my question to the body, or actually to the panel, is if the strategy is to rely on the federal infusion of monies that would be like hanging your cap on a nail on the wall that's not going to be there next year. There are no guarantees. And so that would be my question, Mr. Chairman, to the panel. Is that the strategy, to rely on federal monies that may or may not be infused into this economy to make up those tax revenues as they cite? $7 million is on the table, but I think it's all going to be on the table come early part of next year. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Will. Does anyone from the administration would like to answer that question? Mr. Carlson, thank you, sir.
Thank you, Senator Castro. I think as a baseline, the body voted for the revenues as presented in Bill 282. So that decision by the body, we respect, and we just think that there could be more done for public health. And we are here before you not to detract from anything that the body passed recently, but to ask you for reconsideration in order to assist in the time of a pandemic. That's all we're doing.
Senator Will, does that answer your question?
Mr. Chairman, I'll yield the balance of my time. I'll wait for the next round. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Carlson.
right.
I appreciate your answer.
Thank you. Thank you, Lester. Senator Torres, do you have any questions, ma'am?
I do. To the Department of Administration, the bulk of the monies were given to public health, and the justification was for the Medicaid program local match. But is there, in your opinion, also perhaps an operational shortfall, and that this $5 million will not only aid in the matching grant increase, but also aid in the operations? Specifically, I'm citing to the fact that the budget submission was made probably before additional personnel were brought on by public health for contact tracing and other support of the Department of Public Health. So is there also a need to shore that up, and that perhaps if we don't shore it up, there could be a chance that that support personnel that was hired most recently will not be able to be maintained? Because I'm thinking about real-time developments. I'm thinking about the progression of the COVID response, and whether, in fact, there is a need to provide more resources to public health, not only to avail of additional matching aid funds for Medicaid, but also to ensure that the personnel that is tasked with containing COVID, specifically contact tracers and other personnel recently hired, need to be protected, those jobs. And without an increase, those things may be compromised. Is that an accurate concern and need for increasing the budget to public health?
Thank you, Senator. And if I can answer in a general way first and then get on to public health, I hope you'll bear with me. We have a number of complex programs that we're having to manage within the administration. The contract tracing and other associated activities of public health are important. As Mr. Carlson just mentioned, we have to complete complex reporting on the CARES Act funding too, and that requires people. There are a number of other programs that we're required to complete that require people to administer and report on those programs, which we've never had to do before. So there's an effort that we need to make that needs help, and that help needs to come in funding. Yes, public health needs funding to complete all the programs that they're required to complete with contract tracing and the associated activities, but it goes beyond that because there are other programs that they administer senior meals. You can list all the programs that they administer that require administration. The recent audit that came out highlighted the need for people to administer the SNAP program more effectively. So there are so many programs of public health and in other departments that need this direct help. Medicaid, obviously, is a program that automatically gets some amount, we don't know after January how much that's going to be, but some amount of federal support. We don't want to fall short on that for two reasons. Obviously, we don't want to forfeit the federal money that's available, but also there's a need to spend money on these medical programs. And if we don't have enough funding, like we did at the end of the previous financial year, we have to run over those programs into the following year. That means providers don't get paid, there's a delay on paying providers, and it eats up the current year's funds. We were fortunate in that there was a higher level of Medicaid federal match in that year, but as Mr. Carlson said, in this year, and for all we know, this is going to go into the federal calendar year for 2021, there may be a change. We hope if there is a change, that it's an increase, but we're by no means certain of that.
If I may follow up then, sir, because we're in a health crisis right now, I sympathize with the need to front load everything associated with combating the health crisis. That I think is paramount right now, where we've got in what the Physicians Advisory Group described as a very sick community. And so my sympathies go with that. I also, on record, have been very fiscally responsible and a little skeptical about the numbers, the revenue projections, and increasing it. However, we also know that with the budget, if revenues fall below 3% of projections, it forces the governor to go into a fiscal realignment. Is that correct?
If the projection goes below,
yes.
Yes.
So what the point I'm trying to make is, I think we're really caught in a moral dilemma here. While we want to demonstrate that we're fiscally responsible and all that, we also know that we have the ability to set a goal, and if we fall short of that goal, it forces us anyways to realign and to change. But at the very least, we will have planned for adequate funding for the health crisis aspect of our government operations, which is essentially what the governor is asking us to do with her substitute bill. Isn't that correct? To prioritize this.
Yes, Senator.
So if we were to take the risk and put faith in your projections over OFB's projections, because one comment that I had made and question that I had asked directly to OFB is, 7 million in the grand scheme is less than 1%. It really is, if you were to use a term, chum change. It can be categorized as that. But it also has been told that that could be the straw that breaks the camel's back. However, we do know that if we don't reach that, we are forced to go into fiscal realignment. We will be forced to cut where we will cut outside of public health if that is our priority in this health crisis. So, in essence, we have a safety valve. We have a mechanism to cut expenditures if we fall short by 3% of projections at a certain point. Isn't that correct?
Yes, Senator, and Thank you for pointing that out. We are talking about a difference of less than 1%. I'm an accountant and I like accurate figures, but to be in a disagreement about a figure of less than 1%, when, as you say, the mechanism operates at 3%, doesn't make a whole lot of sense. And I have every confidence in the projections that Mr. Carlson spoke about. So far, withholding tax, which is the biggest part of this difference we're talking about, has been holding up very well. So the figures, if you just take the figures and move them forward, it would certainly just more than justify the projections that BBMR have put before you.
And I think what is perhaps more compelling than that sensible point of view, which is really what a lot of us have been bantering back and forth. Is it substantial or is it not substantial? Does it matter or does it not matter? And I think this body, by passing our budget bill, determined that it did matter. What really is gnawing at me is the idea that we can forfeit $13 million in Medicaid funding to when we know that we're either going to need Medicaid or MIP. And right now, if we can at least shore up Medicaid, because MIP is inevitable, and that black hole is, it's a black hole. There's never probably going to be enough ever, because our population is, there's a great number of us that are either uninsured or indigent. And so we know that need to fund that is always going to be there. And what really is gnawing at me is this idea that we can forfeit $13 million. I do appreciate, though, that we emphasize the point that if we had to go through fiscal realignment because projections aren't going to be there, that is our trigger. That the trigger is there, and that we're forced to do that by law. So it's the idea that once you take a step, you can never go back. I think in this case, there is to some extent a going back period with that provision in our law. I'm sorry, I'm just editorializing, but I'm trying to come to grips with what risk is a reasonable risk and what reason for taking that risk is a reasonable reason, is a valid reason. Thank you.
Anything more, Senator Torres?
No, I don't, but I welcome any
All right,
feedback.
my colleagues, I'd like to remind everyone that we do have an oversight DOL hearing, and unfortunately, we do have that coming up. I know that some of you are like, let's wrap this one up, and we won't be able to wrap this one up. So that being noted, and I've been reminded of the DOL oversight hearing, that's important that we hear from what's going on. That being said, we will recess until 3 o'clock this afternoon.